How's it going, Guardians? Shifty here, and today I'm going to be covering this week's TWAB. In this TWAB, we're going to talk about a free emblem available to every player. In addition to that, we're going to go over some weapon and perk changes that are coming with the 30th anniversary event. Now before I jump into the TWAB, if you end up enjoying the video, make sure to hit that like button, and if you're new to my channel, don't forget to subscribe as well. Alright, so the first piece of news is the Be True Emblem. Ahead of the Transgender Awareness Week, Bungie is adding an emblem to the game that's available to everyone. In this TWAB, you can see the emblem redemption code that you can enter at the code redemption site. And just below that, you can see what the emblem looks like. This information was also included in an in-game announcement today as well. Next up, Bungie announced that the capture zone is back for the Trials Labs this weekend. However, they have made a few changes from last time. 30 seconds after the round starts, a capture zone is enabled. Players can capture this zone to win the round, or just eliminate the other team like normal. The capture zone has a waypoint from round start, including a countdown timer, so everyone will know exactly when and where it will be. The capture zone starts in the middle of the map in the first round and changes locations each round. If you don't remember, in the last Trials Labs, the team that was losing often got a favorable capture zone. Overall, the mode is still elimination, just with a capture zone after 30 seconds, and this time it seems like the capture zones are going to be a bit more random. And as I speculated in the previous section, it says right here that rather than rotating through points that give one team a significant location advantage, we are rotating through 3 neutral zones. One at Temple, one at Mid, and one at Shrine. Also, Bungie is making it so players no longer gain super energy when capturing a zone, either before or after the rounds. Also this weekend, Bungie is going back to the card-based matchmaking with a flawless pool turned on Sunday at reset. Next up in the TWAB, design lead Chris Proctor is giving us some information on weapon and perk changes coming with the 30th anniversary event. First up, we have some PvE changes to both slug and pellet shotguns. So here you can see they are reducing the slug shotgun PvE damage bonus from 30% to 20%, and pellet shotguns are getting a 10% PvE damage bonus. In the current season, linear fusion rifles are pretty hot, especially because of particle deconstruction. However, Bungie doesn't think they have given them quite enough of a buff in the past, so linear fusion rifles are getting an increased PvE damage of 10%. In my weekly vendor video this past week, I actually speculated that caster swords were going to get a buff soon. I mentioned that when I was talking about picking up the Temptations hook that was available on Tuesday. It turns out I was right, and they are reducing the heavy attack ammo cost from 8 to 5. Next up, bows are getting another PvE damage buff against rank and file enemies by about 10%. And the final archetype change is coming to sidearms and fusion rifles. So as it stands right now, sidearms and fusion rifles aren't really hit-scan weapons. However, Bungie would like them to be, and it's kind of tied to frame rate. So they would be hit-scan weapons if a specific distance was covered in one frame. However, if your frame rate was low, generally below 60 frames per second, those two weapons may not always behave as a hit-scan weapon. So in order to fix this, Bungie is increasing the projectile speed for sidearms and fusion rifles from 999 to 9,999. That will essentially make them hit-scan weapons regardless of frame rate. Next up are specific changes to exotic weapons. The first one is for Vex Mythoclast. It's getting a reduced aim assist stat by 25. They are also reducing the linear fusion rifle mode aim assist cone scaler from 1.1 to 1.05. And it also now requires 3 eliminations for a full overcharge instead of just 2. Then for the primary ammo grenade launcher Fighting Lion, they are removing the multi-hit requirement, so dealing any damage will grant the buff. They increased the buff to the reload stat from plus 50 to plus 70. Like it says here, the reload will still be slow if you miss, but if you land any damage whatsoever, Fighting Lion will reload faster than it did before the nerf. They also increased the buff duration to 7 seconds. As mentioned previously, Bungie is adding intrinsic anti-barrier rounds to Arbalest. In my opinion, Arbalest is going to be an excellent weapon for barrier champions in the future. Then they are buffing one of my favorite weapons of all time, the Sleeper Simulant. This will be benefiting from that overall 10% damage buff to linear fusion rifles, but it will also be getting an increased magazine size from 3 to 4 and an increased PvE damage by 6%. Next is the Suros regime. They are specifically changing the dual mode receiver mode on Suros. They're making it so the dual mode receiver mode now grants the following in addition to the current effects: plus 30 range and plus 3 to zoom. For Cryosthesia, they're removing the variable trigger completely. It now fires on trigger press instead of release. Now instead of having a charge shot, it's moved to a special reload. So getting a final blow with the sidearm enables access to the special reload. Once that charged shot is fired, the weapon reverts back to the standard sidearm mode, and this does not cost your entire magazine anymore. And finally, the charged shot now causes an AoE which freezes AI and slows players. Next up, we're getting a buff to Leviathan's Breath. This weapon's catalyst is now changing to grant Archer's tempo in addition to the other effects that it already has. Then we have a Whisper of the Worm buff. It has a reduced delay on activating whispered breathing from the catalyst from 2.1 seconds to 1.2 seconds. In addition to that, White Nail magazine refill is changed. It was 3 from the inventory, but now pulls 2 from the inventory and 1 from thin air. So now with rapid precision hits, you'll also be able to generate ammo from thin air. You're not going to generate 100% of your ammo from thin air like it used to be. However, you still will have more shots to fire off with this weapon. It's also getting a PvE damage increase of 10%. D.A.R.C.I, which is another heavy exotic sniper rifle, is getting buffed. It's getting reduced flinch, recoil, and accuracy degradation by 50% while Personal Assistant is active. Personal Assistant now has a 1-second delay before deactivating when off target, and it's also getting a PvE damage boost of 20%. Surprisingly, Malfeasance is getting a little bit of love here as well. It's getting increased explosive damage by 50%. Then Deadman's Tale is getting a bit of a buff that affects controller players more so than mouse and keyboard players. It's getting increased reticle friction falloff, less recoil, and improved accuracy. All of those have reduced or no effect on mouse and keyboard. The Heir Apparent Catalyst is finally getting nerfed. They're reducing the damage resistance against players from 75% down to 25%. Lorentz Driver is also getting a bit of a nerf as well. It's removing the ability energy regeneration on picking up telemetries. And they're making Traveler's Chosen a bit more predictable. Now it grants 10% ability energy per stack on activation. Previously it was more generous on low stacks and less generous on high stacks. They're also nerfing it a bit in PvP by reducing the stacks granted on a Guardian defeat from 3 down to 2. Moving on to some perk changes. Adrenaline Junkie is now going to work more like Swashbuckler. Eliminations with the weapon can add single damage stacks or extend existing ones. Grenade eliminations boost the stack immediately to ×5. However, the duration is lowered a little bit to compensate for the weapon activation ability. Next, Vorpal is getting a nerf on heavy weapons, remaining the same on special weapons, and getting a buff on primary weapons. It used to be a 15% damage boost on all weapons, now it will be 10% for heavy, 15% on special, and 20% on primary. There will be no changes against supers in the Crucible. Whirlwind Blade is having its max stacks increased from 5 to 10. That means it's going to take a few more stacks to reach that maximum damage. And Pulse Monitor is actually getting a hell of a buff here. They're changing the threshold of activation from 90% health to 30% shield. As it states here, this now requires much less damage to trigger. And we are getting a couple of mod changes as well. First up is Quick Access Sling, which is primarily used on bows and breach grenade launchers. As you can see before, for 0.4 seconds after running out of ammo, you got plus 100 handling, as well as 0.9 times the ready, stow, and aim down sight time. Now it's just going to be 0.9 times the ready and stow time all of the time. Then we're getting a temporary new mod called Full Auto Retrofit. This is essentially going to be a mod that you can add to certain weapons that will make it fire in full auto. This mod can be equipped on legendary hand cannons, sidearms, scout rifles, and pulse rifles. This will be unlocked by default for all players. In the future, this is just going to be a setting in the game that Bungie is adding some point after the Witch Queen. Then Chris talks about some future changes without going into much detail. Here they talk about exotic catalysts and orbs of power generation for exotic weapons. They also want to touch on weapon differentiation in the future. They also want to do some more adjusting to the special ammo economy in PvP to reduce the amount that's floating around. They also want to continue to buff exotic primary weapons and high-end PvE content. Also, they're looking at some exotics in PvP that stand at the top of the usage charts. Also, Bungie is doing another Bungie bounty here on November 15th and November 20th. The first one is for Latin America and the second one is for the United Kingdom. You can see the list of names right here. And then one standout issue that Bungie is aware of is when Warlocks perform a Phoenix dive, they can't slide for 5 seconds. They are aware of a few more issues, but that one is a standout for me. And that is it for this week's TWAB video. If you ended up enjoying it, make sure to like and subscribe. I just want to thank you for watching and I'll catch you on the next one.